The scent of ozone and shattered fate hung heavy in the cold night air. On my knees, I could feel the chill of the ritual stones seeping through the thin linen of my dress, a cold that went bone deep but could not touch the fire scorching my skin. The moonlight, once a promise of salvation, now felt like a spotlight for my humiliation. 3 marks, a trinity of divine treason, pulsed with a faint, angry light on the arch of my collarbone, each one a brand of impossibility. The hushed, venomous whispers of the council elders slithered around me, weaving a cage of judgment. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the sudden, terrible silence of a prophecy broken. It was over, and the one thing that was supposed to save us had just condemned me. The silence was a void, threatening to swallow everything. Then came the sound that cut through it, the crunch of a heavy boot on sacred gravel. 1 set of footsteps, then 2, then 3, each one a declaration. The council parted like a receding tide, their fear a palpable scent on the wind, stronger than the pine and damp earth of the surrounding forest. Through the gap they made, I saw them. Alarion, Bastion, Caedmon, my alphas. The thought was a madness, a heresy that sent a tremor through me. Alarion Dragor, the Alpha King, moved first. His power was a physical force, a pressure that bent the very air around him. His silver eyes, the color of a winter storm, were fixed on me, and in their depths I saw not the disgust of the council, but a possessive, predatory fire that stole the breath from my lungs. He didn't see a curse, he saw a prize. Bastion Corvel, his war chief, stood a half-step behind him, a monolith of scarred muscle and brutal stillness. His gaze wasn't on me, but on the elders, his hand resting on the pommel of the great sword sheathed across his back. He was a storm wall, his silence more threatening than any shout. His bond felt like iron in my blood, a promise of unyielding defense. And Caedmon Thryne, son of our healer, stood slightly apart. He was not built for war like the others, but his strength was of a different kind, a quiet, deep-rooted power that emanated from him like the warmth of a hearth. His eyes, the color of moss and loam, were filled with a pained empathy that was almost my undoing. He saw not a prize or a threat to be managed, but a person breaking under the weight of destiny. Elder Vorlog, his face a roadmap of ancient grudges, stepped forward, his gnarled staff striking the stone with a sharp crack. King Alarion, the Omega is tainted. The prophecy has failed. She is a vessel of chaos, an omen of ruin. She must be cleansed. Cleansed. The word was a death sentence, a ritual of stripping, of scourging, of leaving one to the mercy of the unforgiving wilds, bondless and broken. My blood ran cold. Alarion didn't even glance at the old wolf. His storm-gray eyes remained locked on mine as he took another step, then another until he stood over me, his shadow eclipsing the moon. The air crackled. The 3 marks on my skin flared in unison, a searing heat that made me gasp. He could feel it. I knew he could. She is not tainted. Alarion's voice was low, a rumble of rock and thunder that vibrated through the stone and up into my bones. She is chosen. Chosen for what? Vorlog spat, emboldened by righteous fury. To tear this kingdom apart? 3 alphas, 1 omega. It is a mockery of the moon's law, a blight upon us all. I flinched, curling in on myself. The shame was a physical weight pressing me down. My entire life I had been Thessaly the Omega, the quiet one, the overlooked. I had prayed for a bond that would give me a place, a purpose. Now I had 3, and they had made me a monster. Alarion ignored the elder's tirade. Slowly, astonishingly, he knelt. The Alpha King of all clans, the wolf who bent to no one, lowered himself to one knee before me on the cold, unforgiving stone. Gasps rippled through the assembled crowd. He reached out, his calloused fingers tracing the air just above my skin, his touch a ghost of heat over the marks. His eyes held mine. "Which one is mine, Thessaly?" He murmured, his voice for me alone. My throat was too tight to speak. "My wolf, A terrified, cowering thing for most of my life stirred within me, drawn to the sheer dominance radiating from him. With a trembling hand, I lifted my fingers and brushed them against the centermost mark, the sigil of a roaring wolf, crowned in thorns. His sigil. The moment my skin touched the mark, it erupted. A wave of pure golden light pulsed from the brand, flooding the circle with the warmth of a rising sun. Alarion's power surged into me, a possessive, overwhelming force that tasted of lightning and sovereignty. It was a claim, ancient and absolute. It filled every empty space inside me, roaring mine. Alarion inhaled sharply, his silver eyes flashing gold. He looked from my face to the elders, his expression one of utter, lethal authority. He rose to his full, intimidating height, pulling me up with him. His grip on my arm was firm, anchoring me as the world spun. "Elder Vorlog," he said, his voice now carrying to every corner of the clearing. "You speak of the moon's law, then you will heed it. The moon marked her, the moon chose her, and my soul," he paused. His thumb stroking the furiously glowing brand on my collarbone, answered. He turned his gaze upon the council, a king passing sentence. "She is Thessaly Varenya of Clan Dragor. She is under my protection. Her blood is my blood, her breath is my breath. Any who threaten her, any who speak of cleansing, answer to me, your king." The finality in his tone was absolute. The challenge was laid down. To defy his word now would be to declare war. The elders recoiled, their blustering fury shrinking into sullen silence. But the declaration settled something else. Alarion had claimed not just my safety, but me. The bond thrummed, a possessive fire that demanded my submission, my acceptance. It felt intoxicating and terrifying. For a moment, I was lost in the sheer force of it, the promise of belonging to someone so powerful. Then, a different current pulled at me. A low, dangerous growl rumbled from my other side. It was not loud, but it cut through the king's oppressive aura like a blade through silk. I turned my head. Bastion was no longer watching the council. His dark, unreadable eyes were fixed on Alarion's hand, still wrapped around my arm. The brand that belonged to him, a stoic, snarling wolf framed by a broken shield, was pulsing with a deep crimson light, a stark contrast to Alarion's gold. "You protect her, my king," Bastion's voice was gravel and steel. "And for that, she is fortunate." He took a step forward, entering the space Alarion had claimed, an act of breathtaking defiance. But protection is not possession. Alarion's jaw tightened, the muscles flexing. "Be careful, war chief." "I am always careful," Bastion countered, his gaze finally lifting to meet mine. In them, I saw no softness, only a reflection of the same primal ownership that burned in Alarion's. It was darker, quieter, but no less absolute. The moon marked her with my soul as well. "You may be King Alarion, but you are not my alpha, and you are not hers." The world narrowed to the space between two wolves. Bastion's words hung in the frigid air, a thrown gauntlet of ice and steel. Alarion's hand, still gripping my arm, tightened, his knuckles white. The golden light from his mark pulsed with raw fury, while Bastion's crimson brand answered with a defiant, steady beat against my skin. It was a war being fought in color and light, a battle of souls played out across my body. The pack held its collective breath, their fear and awe a cloying scent that choked me. They were witnessing the impossible, the king's authority challenged by the one wolf sworn to be his unwavering sword. "You forget your place, Bastion." Alarion's voice was dangerously soft, a predator's whisper before the strike. The power rolling off him intensified, pressing down, demanding subservience from every living thing in the circle. Bastion didn't flinch. He stood like a mountain against a hurricane, unmovable. "And you forget the prophecy was not about a king. It was about the pack. She is not your queen to claim. She is something else." His gaze flickered to me, and for a heartbeat, the raw possession in his eyes was stripped away. replaced by a profound, startling confusion that mirrored my own. We were all adrift in this. The tension stretched taut, a thread about to snap. I could feel their wolves circling, snarling just beneath the skin, ready to tear each other apart for a right none of them understood. The conflicting waves of their energy slammed into me, a physical assault. Alarion's bond burned with impatient fire, demanding loyalty. Bastion's bond resonated with a deep, unyielding certainty, a promise of steadfastness. The clash was agony, threatening to rip me in two. A strangled gasp escaped my lips, my knees buckling under the strain. Stop. The voice was not a command like Alarion's, nor a challenge like Bastion's. It was a simple, quiet plea, yet it cut through the din of their power like a healer's knife. Both alphas turned. Caedmon stepped forward, moving out of the shadows and into the moonlight. He had none of their overt menace, none of their crushing dominance, but his presence created its own gravity. The third mark on my skin, a delicate tracery of a crescent moon cradling a blooming wolfsbane, began to glow. It wasn't gold or crimson, but a soft, ethereal, silver green, like moss under a full moon. The light was not a fire, but a balm. A cool, soothing energy trickled from it, spreading across my feverish skin, easing the violent clash of the other two bonds. Caedmon's gentle, worried eyes found mine. "You're hurting her," he said, his words directed at the two titans locked in their standoff. "Can't you feel it? Your pride is tearing her apart." Alarion's jaw worked, his gaze dropping to me, truly seeing the tremor in my limbs, the pallor of my face. A flicker of something, regret, frustration, crossed his features. Bastion's stony expression remained, but the crimson light of his mark softened almost imperceptibly. Caedmon knelt beside me, not with the regal shock of a king, but with the quiet care of a healer. He didn't touch me, not yet. He simply offered his presence as a shield. "Thessaly," he murmured, his voice a low current of calm. "Breathe with me." He took a slow, deliberate breath, and I found myself matching it, my frantic heartbeat beginning to steady. His bond was different. It wasn't a chain of ownership. It felt like a root, grounding me, connecting me to the quiet, steady strength of the earth itself. Elder Vorlog, seeing the division, saw his chance. "Look," he crowed, his voice dripping with vindication as he pointed a trembling finger. "The curse spreads. It sets brother against brother, king against shield. She is a plague upon us." His words broke the spell. Alarion's face hardened, the brief moment of concern vanishing behind the mask of the king. He straightened, pulling me to my feet once more. His grip was no longer painful, but it was unyielding. "Enough," he commanded, his voice once more an iron bell of authority. He swept his gaze over the council, the pack, and his two rivals. "This is not a matter for public debate or ancient superstition. It is a matter of the crown." He looked at me, his silver eyes intense. "She will come with me to the keep. She will be housed in my quarters, where she will be safe, and where I will get to the bottom of this." It was a brilliant move. He wasn't just offering protection, he was asserting control, sequestering me within the heart of his power where he could dictate the terms. Bastion's eyes narrowed, the crimson of his mark flaring again, a silent protest. Caedmon looked up, his expression deeply troubled, but he held his tongue. To argue now would be to play into Vorlog's hands and openly defy the king, risking a schism that could shatter the clans. Without another word, Alarion turned and began to walk, pulling me along with him. The crowd parted before us, a sea of whispers and hostile stares. I felt like a spoil of war being paraded through the capital. Every eye was on me, dissecting me, judging me. Some looked with pity, others with open hatred. They didn't see Thessaly. They saw a broken prophecy, a walking catastrophe. My old life was gone. In the space of a single moonrise, I had been erased. The walk to the stone keep was the longest of my life. The air grew colder as we left the sacred circle and climbed the winding path. Alarion said nothing, his profile carved from granite, his focus entirely on moving forward. But I could feel the storm of his emotions through the bond. Possessiveness, yes, but also a deep, unsettling current of uncertainty that he masked with royal fury. He was as lost as I was. Behind us, 2 sets of footsteps followed. One was the heavy, implacable tread of Bastion, a constant, menacing presence at our backs. He was not letting us out of his sight. The other was the softer, quicker step of Caedmon. He was not following as a threat, but as a guardian, his soothing energy a faint but constant presence, trying to shield me from the worst of the pack's animosity. We reached the great iron-bound doors of the keep. The guards snapped to attention, their eyes widening in shock as they saw me at the king's side, held so intimately. Alarion swept past them, his stride never faltering. We moved through stone corridors that echoed with history, past ancient tapestries depicting legendary hunts and glorious battles. The air inside was thick with the scent of power, old stone, wood smoke, beeswax, and beneath it all, Alarion's own scent of cold pine and steel. It was overwhelming, designed to intimidate, to remind all who entered who was in charge. He didn't stop until we reached a set of massive carved oak doors. He pushed them open and ushered me inside, closing them firmly behind us. The sound of the heavy latch clicking into place felt like a cell door locking. I was in the Alpha King's private chambers. The room was vast, dominated by a hearth large enough to stand in and a bed carved from the trunk of a single, ancient oak. Furs were strewn over chairs and the floor, and maps of the territories were spread across a massive wooden table. A set of doors stood open to a stone balcony that overlooked the entire valley, the moon hanging like a silver lantern in the sky. It was a room of stark, masculine power. Alarion finally released my arm. The absence of his touch left my skin feeling cold. He walked to the hearth, staring into the dying embers. The firelight cast his face in flickering shadow, making him look more like a ruthless king from a dark legend than a living man. "The council will call for your head," he said without turning. "Vorlag sees you as a weapon to use against me, to undermine my rule. He will say I am bewitched by a curse." I stood frozen by the door, wrapping my arms around myself. "I didn't ask for this," I whispered, my voice raw. "None of us did," he replied, finally turning to face me. He crossed the room in 3 long strides, stopping just before me. He was so tall, so imposing, he seemed to block out the rest of the world. He reached out, his touch surprisingly gentle as his fingers brushed against my neck, tracing the skin around the 3 glowing marks. "But it is what we have been given. The moon does not make mistakes, Thessaly. She makes weapons. She makes kings. And she has made you this." His silver eyes bored into mine, searching for answers. The golden light of his mark intensified, drawing my gaze, pulling at my will. His power washed over me again, this time more intimately, without the competing forces of the others. It whispered of strength, of safety, of a place at the peak of the world, beside him. My own inner wolf, overwhelmed and terrified, felt an undeniable pull to submit, to accept this powerful alpha's protection and end the terrifying uncertainty. It would be so easy to just let go, to let him decide. I leaned in, my eyelids fluttering shut, ready to yield to the singular, simple promise of his bond. A sharp, authoritative knock echoed from the heavy oak door. Alarion's head snapped up, his eyes flashing with irritation. "Who dares?" he roared. The door swung open. It hadn't been locked. Bastion stood on the threshold, his massive frame filling the doorway. His dark eyes bypassed the king completely, landing on me. He saw how close Alarion was, saw the yielding in my posture, and a low, dangerous growl rumbled in his chest. He took a step into the room, his presence an immediate and defiant challenge to Alarion's authority in his own sanctum. "She is not a conquest to be locked in your tower, king," Bastion's voice was a low, rumbling threat. "Wherever she is, we are." The air in the king's chambers grew thick, heavy with the ozone scent of imminent violence. Alarion, a figure of pure, incandescent rage, took a step toward his war chief. Bastion stood his ground, a bulwark of granite, his hand never straying far from the hilt of his sword. The golden mark of the king and the crimson brand of the warrior pulsed on my skin, a frantic, painful rhythm that echoed the snarling of the wolves trapped within the men. They weren't just arguing over me. They were testing the very foundations of their history, their loyalty, their entire world. I was the fault line, and the chasm was widening with every beat of my heart. "You dare," Alarion breathed, the words more dangerous than a shout. "You dare to enter my sanctum and dictate terms to your king?" "You are my king on the battlefield and in the council hall," Bastion countered, his voice a low rasp of honed steel. "But the moon is a higher authority, and her mark on my soul does not answer to your crown." He looked at me, and his dark, impenetrable gaze softened for a fraction of a second. "I will not leave her alone with you, not while your wolf sees her as nothing more than territory to be conquered." The accusation struck true. I could feel the possessive, conquering nature of Alarion's bond, the desire to overwhelm and claim me completely. But I could also feel Bastion's, a relentless, unyielding claim of protection that bordered on obsession. One was a fire threatening to consume me, the other a cage of iron promising to keep me safe. Both would leave me without a will of my own. "I would not harm her," Alarion roared, his control finally snapping. He lunged forward, not to strike, but to impose, his immense power crashing down like a physical wave. Bastion met it head-on. He didn't move, but the force of his own will rose to meet the king's, a shield of unshakable resolve. The air between them shimmered. The furs on the floor stirred as if in a gale. The embers in the hearth flared, casting wild, dancing shadows that looked like wolves tearing at each other's throats. The pressure was immense, crushing me. My vision swam, black spots dotting the edges. The marks on my skin felt like they were burning straight through to the bone. Just as the world began to fade, a new presence entered the room. "If you tear down these walls with your rage, you will only prove the council right." Caedmon stood in the open doorway, his form silhouetted against the torchlight of the hall. He hadn't entered with a challenge, but with a quiet statement of fact that somehow doused the worst of the flames. With him came his scent. Crushed herbs, damp soil, clean rain, a scent that cut through the metallic tang of rage and brought a desperate gasp of relief to my lungs. The silver-green mark on my collarbone pulsed with a steady, cooling light, an anchor in the storm. He walked past the two titans, his focus entirely on me. He stopped a respectful distance away, his healer's eyes assessing my pale face, the tremor in my hands. "They are fools," he said softly, his voice meant only for me. "Blinded by power, they've forgotten you are at the center of this, that you feel everything they feel, but threefold." Alarion and Bastion watched him, their animosity momentarily redirected. Caedmon was an anomaly. He held no title of power, commanded no warriors, yet neither of them could dismiss him. His bond to me was as real as theirs, a fact that infuriated and confused them in equal measure. "What do you want, healer's son?" Alarion demanded, his voice tight with restraint. Caedmon turned, his expression grave. "I came to warn you, all of you." He looked from Alarion to Bastion, then back again. "Elder Vorlog is not idle. He and the others are not simply whispering in the corners. They have invoked the old law." A chilling silence fell over the room. The old law was a collection of rights and judgments from a more savage time, precedents set before the clans were united. They were brutal, bloody, and rarely spoken of. "He has summoned my father," Caedmon continued, his voice dropping lower. "He is forcing him to unseal the ancient scrolls. They are looking for a specific ritual." He paused, and his gentle eyes met mine, filled with a dread that terrified me more than the Alphas' anger. "They are searching for the rite of severance." Bastion let out a short, sharp breath, like he'd taken a blow. Even Alarion's regal composure fractured. a flicker of true alarm in his storm gray eyes. I didn't know the name, but I felt its meaning in the sudden icy grip of fear around my heart. Severance? I whispered, the word tasting like ash. Kedmon came closer, and this time he did not hesitate. He gently took my hand. His skin was warm, his touch not a brand of ownership, but a steady, grounding connection. The silver-green light from his mark flowed up my arm, a current of soothing energy. It is a forbidden magic, he explained, his gaze holding mine, trying to impart strength. A ritual to break a bond the elders deem unnatural or cursed. It does not simply erase the marks. It tears the bonded soul apart, scouring it clean. Most do not survive. Those who do are empty husks. Less than ghosts. The room was utterly still. The image he painted was one of utter annihilation. Vorlog didn't want to cleanse me. He wanted to unmake me. He wanted to prove the prophecy was a mistake by destroying the evidence, and in doing so, fatally weaken Alarion's authority. They would not dare, Alarion snarled, his regal fury returning, now aimed at the council. To invoke the old law without the king's consent is treason of the highest order. They will say the king is compromised, Bastian stated, his strategic mind cutting to the heart of the matter, that he is ensorcelled by the very curse they seek to break. They will use your protection of her as proof of your corruption. For the first time since this nightmare began, the three of them were looking at the same enemy. The power struggle in the room shifted. It was no longer a triangle of rivals, but a point with three guards facing outward, toward a common threat. My father is trying to stall them, Kedmon said, his grip on my hand tightening slightly. But Vorlog is zealous. He believes he is saving the pack from damnation. He will not be easily deterred. Alarion began to pace before the hearth, a caged lion plotting. We cannot attack the council directly. It would incite a civil war. We must be smarter. He stopped, his eyes fixing on me. A new plan was forming behind his gaze, one that was sharp and dangerous. They want to prove the bond is a curse. We will prove it is a blessing. How? Bastian demanded. By locking her away and declaring it so by royal decree? No, Alarion said, his gaze sweeping to include both Bastian and Caedmon. By understanding it, by mastering it. He turned back to me, his expression intense. Thessaly, when I touched my mark on you, what did you feel? I swallowed hard, remembering the overwhelming wave of his power, his soul. I felt you, your strength, your right to rule. It was a lot. He nodded, then looked at Bastian. And yours? I glanced at the war chief, who watched me with an unnerving stillness. His was different, solid, a shield, a promise to endure. Alarion's eyes finally landed on Caedmon. I looked at the healer's son, at our joined hands. I struggled to find the words. It's not a command or a shield. It's a connection to the earth, to living things. When he touches me, it doesn't hurt anymore. As I spoke, a revelation dawned on me. Strength, endurance, life, power, body, and spirit. A king, a warrior, a healer. The three alphas seemed to realize it at the same moment. They looked at each other, the animosity replaced by a dawning, grudging understanding. This wasn't random. It was a pattern. The moon did not give you 3 alphas, Caedmon murmured, his eyes wide with discovery. She gave you 3 pillars, the 3 pillars of the pack itself. The air crackled with the weight of his words. The prophecy hadn't been shattered. It had been misunderstood. We had all been looking at it as a romantic bond, a choosing of a mate, but it was something far greater, far more fundamental. As the truth of it settled over me, a searing pain, sharp and blinding, erupted from the center of my chest. It was not the angry burn of the alphas' conflict, but something else entirely, a spike of white-hot energy driving through me. I cried out, doubling over, my free hand clutching my collarbone. The 3 marks blazed as one, their distinct colors swirling together into a single blinding point of pure white moonlight. Thessaly! The three of them moved at once, surrounding me. I fell to my knees, gasping, my head thrown back. The world around me dissolved into a vortex of light and shadow. I could feel them, all three of them, their panic, their fear, their power rushing toward me, trying to help. But they couldn't touch this. This was inside me, and then a voice filled my head. It was not my own. It was ancient, female, and echoed with the cold, clear light of 1,000 full moons. Words began to spill from my lips, but my mouth was not my own. The voice that came out was a layered whisper, a chorus of echoes from a time long past. When the soul is sundered, the kingdom bleeds. My eyes, wide and unseeing, stared into a space none of them could perceive. 3 as 1 to mend the breach, 1 heart to bind them, lest the shadow feeds. The echo of the ancient voice faded, leaving behind a silence so profound it felt like the world had been hollowed out. I was on the floor, my body trembling, a vessel emptied of a power it was never meant to hold. The searing pain in my chest subsided into a dull, throbbing ache. The blinding white light behind my eyes receded, leaving me blinking at the concerned faces of the 3 most powerful wolves I had ever known. They were a trinity of fear and awe, their own internal battles momentarily forgotten in the face of what they had just witnessed. Cadmon was the first to move, his healer's instincts overriding everything else. He knelt, his fingers gently finding the pulse at my wrist. It was a simple clinical touch, but through our bond, I felt a wave of his calm, a silent command for my racing heart to slow. "Thessaly, can you hear me?" I could only nod, my throat raw, as if I'd been screaming for hours. My limbs felt heavy, disconnected. Bastion didn't approach. Instead, he moved to the great oak doors and shut them with a quiet, definitive thud. He stood before them, his back to us, a living barricade between our fragile sanctuary and the hostile world outside. His crimson mark pulsed with a steady, protective rhythm, a silent vow that no one else would enter. Alarion remained standing, his face a mask of shock and calculation. The king was processing, analyzing, fitting this impossible new piece into the puzzle of his fractured kingdom. He looked down at me, his silver eyes stripped of their earlier rage, now burning with an intensity that was almost frightening. He saw me not as a curse, or a prize, or even a woman. He saw a key. "The words," he commanded, his voice tight. "Tell me the words again, exactly as you heard them." I shook my head, a wave of dizziness washing over me. I don't remember saying them," I stammered. "It wasn't me, it was a voice. Inside me." "When the soul is sundered, the kingdom bleeds," Caedmon recited softly, his gaze never leaving my face. 3 as 1 to mend the breach, 1 heart to bind them, lest the shadow feeds. He looked up at Alarion. It was not a memory, it was a channeling. She spoke with the moon's own voice. The weight of his statement settled in the room. This was no longer just a broken prophecy, it was a new one, a dire warning delivered through me. Alarion knelt, mirroring Caedmon, bringing his regal face level with mine. The scent of pine and cold air from him was sharp, cutting through my disorientation. "The breach," he murmured, his mind racing. "Vorlog. He seeks to create a breach between the clans, to sunder my rule." "And the shadow is the council," Bastion added from the door, his voice a low rumble. "Feeding on the chaos they create." It was a logical conclusion, but as the words settled, they felt wrong, too simple. The feeling that had accompanied the voice, the sheer ancient cold of it, spoke of a danger far older than pack politics. I shivered, a deep, bone-felt chill that had nothing to do with the night air. Caedmon seemed to feel my unease. "Perhaps," he said, his tone cautious, "but these old prophecies are rarely so direct. A soul sundered could mean the breaking of her bond." He glanced at the marks on my skin, which had returned to their 3 distinct colors, glowing softly in the dim light. "If Vorlog performs the rite of severance, he won't just be destroying Thessaly. He will be fulfilling the first line of the warning. The implication was terrifying. In their blind zeal to destroy what they saw as a curse, the elders would be the ones to bring about the very doom the prophecy foretold. The sheer exhaustion of it all finally hit me, a wave that threatened to drag me under. My vision blurred. Caedmon's grip on my wrist tightened, steadying me. "She needs to rest," he said, his healer's voice firm, cutting through the strategic debate. The channeling took a massive toll on her. Her body is not accustomed to being a conduit for such power. Alarion looked at me, his gaze lingering on my pale face. For a moment, the king vanished, and I saw only the wolf, a flicker of raw, primal concern in his eyes. He rose and turned to the massive carved bed. With a sweep of his arm, he pulled back the heavy furs. "Here," he said. It was not a request. I hesitated. To lie in the Alpha King's bed was a gesture of immense significance. It was an act of submission, of acceptance. But looking at his face, I saw no triumphant claim, only a grim necessity. He was protecting an asset. And yet, the golden thrum of our bond felt different. Less like a chain, more like a shield. Caedmon helped me to my feet, my legs unsteady. I moved toward the bed, the plush furs sighing as I sank into them. The scent of Alarion was everywhere. In the linen, the furs, the very wood of the frame. It should have been intimidating, but in my drained state, it was simply strong. An anchor. Caedmon gently pulled a heavy fur blanket over me, his touch lingering for a moment on my shoulder. I lay there, cocooned in warmth and the sense of my 3 alphas, a bizarre island of peace in a sea of chaos. Bastion remained at the door, a silent, unmoving guardian. Caedmon stood near the bed, his presence a soothing balm. Alarion paced before the fire, the weight of the crown and the prophecy pressing down on him. For the first time, I didn't just see them, I felt them. The bonds, no longer a source of chaotic pain, had settled into 3 distinct currents flowing within me. I could feel the restless, burning energy of Alarion's mind as he plotted their next move. I could feel the steadfast, patient strength of Bastion, a deep, quiet river of resolve. And I could feel the gentle, empathetic worry emanating from Caedmon, a warmth that sought to mend the frayed edges of my spirit. They were a part of me now. Their souls were woven into mine. And in that moment, lying in the king's bed, guarded by his warrior and tended by his healer, I felt a terrifying, exhilarating flicker of what the prophecy meant. One heart to bind them, my heart. The quiet was shattered by a sharp, urgent rapping at the chamber doors. Bastion didn't move. "Who is it?" he called out, his voice a low growl that could freeze blood. "A message for the healer's son," came a nervous voice from the other side. "From his father, it is urgent." Caedmon's head snapped up, his calm expression instantly replaced by one of alarm. He looked at Bastion, who gave a curt nod before unlatching the door and opening it a crack. A young guard stood there, pale and sweating, holding a small, sealed scroll. He handed it to Bastion, refusing to look past the war chief into the king's chambers, and then scurried away. Bastion broke the seal and passed the scroll to Caedmon. As Caedmon's eyes scanned the parchment, the silver-green light of his mark flickered with anxiety. "What is it?" Alarion demanded, stopping his pacing. "It's my father," Caedmon said, his voice strained. "Vorlog has cornered him in the archives beneath the healing hall. He has brought the scouring stones and the ritual knives. He is demanding my father show him the final passage of the rite of severance, claiming it is the council's will. The scouring stones." The name itself felt abrasive, violent. They were moving and moving fast. "He is trying to force your father's hand," Bastion stated grimly. "He knows Elian would never willingly aid him, so he brings the tools of the ritual to his door to create the appearance of consent." "I have to go," Caedmon said, his jaw set. "My father is old. He cannot stand against Vorlog alone." "No," Alarion commanded, stepping forward. "It is a trap. Vorlog wants to separate us. He will have you seize the moment you step outside this keep." "He is my Fimerida," Caedmon shot back, his gentle demeanor replaced by a fierce loyalty that rivaled the other two. I will not abandon him to that viper." As he spoke, as his emotions surged, I felt a sharp lance of his fear and desperation through our bond. The connection between us flared, and for a split second, the world around me dissolved. I was no longer in the king's bedchamber. I saw through Caedmon's eyes a flash of memory or premonition, a dark, dusty room, shelves filled with scrolls, the glint of obsidian knives on a velvet cloth, and the terrified face of an old man who looked just like him. And then I saw something else. On the ancient scroll Vorlog held open, just for a moment, my vision focused on a symbol drawn in faded ink at the bottom of the page. It wasn't a wolf sigil. It was a dark, spidery rune, a web of broken lines that seemed to absorb the light around it. Beneath it, a name. The vision vanished as quickly as it came, leaving me gasping, my heart pounding. "Wait!" I cried out, pushing myself up on my elbows. My voice was stronger now, fueled by a sudden, terrifying certainty. All three of them turned to me. I looked at Caedmon, my eyes wide. The rite of severance. It's not just a ritual to break a bond, it's a key. "What are you talking about?" Ilarion asked, his focus sharp as a razor's edge. "The shadow," I breathed, the pieces clicking into place with horrifying clarity. "The prophecy, it isn't Vorlog. He's just a pawn. The shadow is real. The rite, it doesn't just sever the soul. It uses that energy to unlock something, to feed something." I locked my gaze with Caedmon, trying to make him see what I saw. "The scroll, there is a name on it, a name the rite is meant to awaken." A strange cold dread began to dawn on Ilarion's face. He knew. He and Bastion both knew what I was about to say. "The shadow has a name," I whispered, the word feeling like a curse on my tongue. "Morwen." Complete, utter stillness descended upon the room. The name hung in the air like a drop of poison. Bastion, who had faced down armies without flinching, took an involuntary step back from the door. Caedmon's face went ashen, and Ilarion, the Alpha King, looked at me with an expression of pure, unadulterated horror. "Morwen was the first," he said, his voice a dead, hollow whisper. "The first Omega, the one whose soul was so dark the moon shattered it and cursed her name from memory. The rite of severance was not created to break bonds. It was created to contain her. The name Morwen was a key that unlocked a chamber of ancient fear in the room. The air grew colder, heavier, charged with the weight of a forgotten history. This was no longer about a power struggle between a king and his council. It was about a legend, a primal darkness that predated them all. Vorlog, in his blind fanaticism, was about to unleash a nightmare he couldn't possibly comprehend. Ilarion was the first to break the horrified silence. The king's mask snapped back into place, but this time it was forged not of pride, but of grim, terrible necessity. "Bastion!" he barked, his voice ringing with command. "The tunnels!" Bastion needed no other explanation. He nodded once, a sharp, decisive movement. "They will be expecting an attack on the main archives. The healer's entrance will be watched, but they will have forgotten the old ways." He looked at Caedmon. "The crypt passage, does it still open into the root cellar beneath the hall?" Caedmon, still pale, forced himself to focus. "Yes, my father keeps the seal maintained. He always said we should never abandon the paths of our ancestors." "Good," Ilarion stated, turning his attention to me. He crossed to the bed, his movement swift and purposeful. The golden light of his mark burned with a fierce protective fire. "You will stay here. The royal guard will be posted at every entrance to this wing. Nothing will get in or out." I shook my head, my own fear warring with a sudden, unshakable certainty. "No." The words spoken quietly stopped him cold. He stared at me, disbelief warring with irritation in his silver-eyed sour eyes. "This is not a debate, Thessaly. You are the center of this. If they get their hands on you, then they win," I finished for him, my voice gaining strength. "If you hide me away, you prove their point, that I'm a weakness to be protected, a thing to be hidden. but the prophecy said one heart to bind them. It meant me. I am the key, Ilarion. Not just to the bond, but to whatever this darkness is. I have to be there. She is right, Caedmon said, his voice surprisingly firm. He stepped forward, standing with me, a healer ready to enter the fray. Morwen was an Omega, a dark one, yes, but an Omega nonetheless. Thessaly's bond, this unique connection she has, it might be the only thing that can counter whatever Vorlog is trying to unleash. Ilarion looked between us, his jaw tight with frustration. He was a king, a warrior used to giving orders and having them obeyed without question. My defiance, bolstered by Caedmon's logic, was a challenge to his most basic instincts. He looked to Bastion for support, but the war chief was watching me, his dark eyes unreadable. The girl has the courage of a warrior, Bastion stated, his voice a low rumble of grudging respect. And the healer speaks the truth. We know nothing of this ancient magic. Her connection may be our only weapon. It is a risk, but leaving her here alone, a prize for Vorlog to claim if we should fall, is a greater one. The three pillars, the three souls. For the first time, they were not in opposition, but in alignment. Alarion's authority, Bastion's strategy, and Caedmon's wisdom, all pointing in the same direction. The king let out a harsh breath, a sound of reluctant surrender. Fine, he conceded, the word tasting like defeat. But you do not leave my side, not for an instant. He turned to the massive wardrobe carved against one wall and threw open the doors. He pulled out a heavy cloak of dark, undyed wool and a pair of soft leather breeches and a tunic. Change, we move in 5 minutes. He turned his back, giving me the illusion of privacy. Caedmon gave my hand a final reassuring squeeze before moving to confer with Bastion in low, urgent tones. My heart hammered against my ribs as I shed the thin ceremonial dress, a relic of a life that now seemed a century past, and pulled on the practical clothes. They were too large, smelling of Alarion's scent of pine and cold steel, but they felt like armor. I fastened the cloak, pulling the deep hood up to shadow my face. I was no longer Thessaly the Omega, the sacrificial offering. I was a part of this fight. When I was ready, I turned. Ilarion glanced at me, his eyes taking in my changed appearance. A flicker of something primal and possessive crossed his face before he suppressed it. "Stay between us at all times," he ordered. He led the way to a section of the stone wall near the hearth. He pressed a sequence of carved knots in the stonework, and with a low groan of grinding rock, a section of the wall slid aside, revealing a dark, narrow opening and a set of steep, spiraling stairs descending into blackness. The air that rose to meet us was stale and cold, smelling of deep earth and forgotten time. Bastion went first, drawing a long knife from his boot, its edge gleaming in the firelight. Ilarion gestured for me to follow, with Caedmon taking up the rear. The king sealed the passage behind us, plunging us into absolute darkness. A moment later, a small contained flame sprang to life in a shielded lantern in Bastion's hand, casting long dancing shadows. We moved in silence, our footsteps echoing in the tight space. The air grew colder, damper. The tunnel was ancient, the stones slick with moisture. It was a path of last resort, a secret known only to the Alpha King and his most trusted council. And now, to me, I could feel them. A silent web of communication passing between the three Alphas. Alarion's focused determination, a beacon leading the way. Bastion's heightened senses, a living shield scanning for any hint of threat. Caedmon's quiet energy, a source of calm that kept my own panic at bay. The bonds were no longer separate forces pulling at me, but a single braided cord of strength. I was the center, the heart, and through me, they were united in purpose. After what felt like an eternity, Bastion held up a hand, stopping us. He extinguished the lantern, plunging us back into blackness. Ahead, a faint sliver of light was visible, along with the low, muffled sound of voices. We had reached the root cellar. Bastion crept forward, peering through a crack in the heavy wooden door. After a long moment, He motioned for us to advance. He lifted the heavy iron latch with painstaking slowness, avoiding any sound. He eased the door open just enough for us to slip through into a large, cold cellar smelling of earth, roots, and dried herbs. The voices were louder now, coming from the floor above. We could hear the fanatical, lecturing tone of Elder Vorlog and the weary, defiant replies of another man, Kaidman's father, Elian. "You are dabbling in forces you do not understand, Vorlog." Elian's voice was frail but firm. "The rite was a lock, not a key. To perform it on a bonded soul is to offer a sacrifice." "I am sacrificing a curse to save our people," Vorlog's voice boomed. "The king is compromised, bewitched by the tainted Omega. The council has decreed that the blight must be purged. Show me the final passage, Elian, or we will proceed without it, and the consequences of an imperfect ritual will be on your head." Bastion led us up a set of stone steps to another door, this one leading into the back of the healing hall. He listened intently, then glanced at Alarian and nodded. Alarian looked at me, his silver eyes locking with mine. "Stay behind me." The command wasn't spoken, but I felt it through the bond as clearly as if he'd shouted it. With a single coordinated movement, Bastion threw the door open and Alarion swept into the room. The scene was exactly as I had seen in my vision. We were in the archives, a circular room lined with towering shelves of scrolls. In the center, Elder Vorlog stood over a frail, white-haired wolf who could only be Ilian. Two burly council guards flanked Vorlog, their hands on their weapons. On a central table lay an ancient, unbound scroll, held open by the black, menacing shapes of the scouring stones. Next to them lay a set of obsidian ritual knives. Vorlog and his guards spun around, their faces a mask of shock and fury at our sudden appearance. Elian's face flooded with relief at the sight of his son. "Treason," Vorlog spat, his eyes wild. "You dare to interfere with the sacred rites of the council?" "There is nothing sacred about this." Alarion's voice was cold as winterstone. "You are a traitor, Vorlog. You have invoked forbidden magic and plotted against your king." "You are no king of mine," Vorlog shrieked, his composure shattering. "Not while you are enthralled to that creature." He pointed a trembling finger at me as I emerged from behind Alarion. "There she is, the source of all this chaos. Seize her, perform the rite." The two guards hesitated, their eyes darting between their fanatical elder and their furious king. Bastion took a menacing step forward, drawing the greatsword from his back. The whisper of steel was a death sentence, and the guards froze completely. "It is over, Vorlog," Alarion said, advancing on him. "Yield, and you may yet be granted a swift death." But Vorlog was beyond reason. A mad light gleamed in his eyes. "You are too late, fool," he cackled. "The incantation is begun. The power is already gathering." He snatched one of the obsidian knives from the table and lunged not at Alarion, but at his own chest. Before anyone could react, he plunged the blade deep into his own heart. A collective gasp filled the room. Vorlog crumpled to the floor, a grotesque smile on his face. But it wasn't over. A river of black, viscous energy, thick as tar, poured from his wound, flowing not onto the floor, but across the table and onto the ancient scroll. The spidery rune I had seen in my vision began to glow with a sickly, purple light. The air in the room grew unnaturally cold. The torchlight flickered and dimmed. A low, guttural whispering filled the chamber, coming from nowhere and everywhere at once. It was a sound of ancient hunger, of a soul that had been starved for millennia. The shadow was feeding. The black energy coalesced over the scroll, forming a writhing, amorphous shape. It was a being of pure malice, its form constantly shifting, solidifying one moment into a monstrous wolf of shadow and smoke, the next into the silhouette of a woman with eyes of burning void. Morwen. Her shadowy form turned, her empty gaze fixing on me. I felt a psychic pressure, a malevolent will that sought to crush my own. It was a void, an anti-bond, a force that sought not to connect, but to consume. "Mine," the voice whispered in my mind, a chilling echo of Alarion's earlier claim, but twisted, predatory, The vessel, the heart, give it to me. The shadow surged forward. Bastion moved to intercept, his greatsword swinging, but the blade passed through the shadow with no effect. Alarion unleashed a wave of his alpha power, a force that should have leveled the room, but the shadow simply absorbed it, growing stronger. It was coming for me. Caedmon stood before me, a futile but brave shield. "The bond!" he yelled over the rising psychic scream of the shadow. "Alarion, Bastien, now! Give her your strength!" They didn't hesitate. Alarion slammed his hand onto my left shoulder, Bastion onto my right. Their power flooded into me, gold and crimson, fire and iron. But I was not just a conduit. I was the heart. I reached up, my own hands covering theirs, and I didn't just accept their power. I drew it, willed it, commanded it. I felt Caedmon place his hands on my back, his life-giving energy pouring into me, a silver-green river of spirit. Power, body, spirit, king, warrior, healer. Their 3 souls poured into mine. The 3 marks on my collarbone erupted, not in their separate colors, but as one. A single blinding point of pure, incandescent white light, the color of the moon at her zenith. The light exploded from me, a wave of pure creation that slammed into the shadow's unmaking void. The entity shrieked, a sound of pure agony that tore at the very fabric of reality as the light of the threefold soul hit it. It was not a battle of strength, but of nature. A void cannot exist where there is fullness. A shadow cannot survive in the heart of a star. One heart to bind them. The prophecy was never about me choosing one of them. It was about me binding all 3 of them into a force greater than any single alpha, any single soul. A force capable of mending the breach in the world that Morwen had created so long ago. The white light intensified, and in its glare, I saw them all. Alarion, Bastion, Caedmon, their faces strained with effort, pouring everything they were into me. And I held them all, my heart the crucible, forging their 3 souls into one. 6 full moons had passed, 6 cycles of silver light waxing and waning across the valley. The scent of pine and thawing earth drifted through the open doors of the great hall, a promise of spring after a long, harrowing winter. The scouring stones and the cursed scroll had been ritually burned, their ashes scattered in a deep, hidden chasm where no light could ever reach. Vorlag's treachery was a grim footnote in the histories, a lesson in the dangers of pride and fear. But the shadow he had almost unleashed had left its mark, not as a scar, but as a profound and permanent change in the very fabric of our world. The great hall, once a place of stiff formality and simmering tension, was filled with the low, comfortable murmur of the pack. Not just Clan Dregor, but representatives from all the clans, gathered not for a tense council meeting, but for the seasonal feast. There was still a hierarchy, still an order, but the rigid lines of fear had softened. They were rebuilding, not just their laws, but their trust. I stood on the raised dais, not beside a throne, but in the space between 3 carved chairs of ancient oak. My dress was simple, the color of a twilight sky leaving my collarbone bare. The marks were still there, no longer glowing with uncontrolled power, but settled into my skin like intricate silver tattoos. A crowned wolf, a shielded wolf, and a wolf surrounded by healing herbs. They were a part of me now, as natural as the beat of my own heart. From my vantage point, I could see them all. Caedmon moved through the crowd, a cup of wine in one hand, a poultice of herbs in the other. He stopped to speak with an elder from a distant clan, his head bent, his expression one of sincere empathy as he listened to a tale of a harsh winter. The silver green of his bond was a steady, warm current within me, a connection to the lifeblood of the people, their hurts and their hopes. He was no longer just the healer's son. He was the pack's heart, his quiet wisdom sought by warriors and mothers alike. He would occasionally glance up at me, a soft smile touching his lips, a silent question, "Are you well?" And I would answer with a smile of my own. The bond between us, a gentle, reassuring hum. Near the great hearth, Bastion stood with a group of grizzled war chiefs from the mountain clans. He was not laughing, for Bastion rarely laughed, but the brutal stillness had left him. In its place was a solid, grounded presence that invited confidence. He spoke in low tones, his hands gesturing as he explained a new strategy for patrols along the borders. They listened not with the deference of subordinates, but with the respect of equals. He was no longer just the king's sword. He was the pack's shield, his unyielding strength a source of security for all. The crimson bond resonated within me, a deep, powerful cord of steadfastness and unwavering loyalty. He would meet my gaze across the crowded room, his dark eyes holding a silent promise. You are safe. And then there was Ilarion. He was not seated on his throne, but standing near the doors, speaking with a young alpha whose father had sided with Vorlog. He wasn't passing judgment or offering a pardon. He was listening. The transformation in him was the most profound of all. The arrogant, possessive fire had been tempered into a bright, steady flame. He still carried the immense weight of the crown, but he no longer carried it alone. He had learned that true power was not in commanding obedience, but in forging unity. He was no longer just a king of clans. He was the alpha of a true pack. His golden bond was a brilliant clarion call in my soul, a song of leadership and purpose. He finished his conversation and his silver eyes found mine. The raw possession was gone, replaced by a depth of emotion that still stole my breath, reverence, partnership, and a love that was as vast and awe-inspiring as his kingdom. He started toward me, his path clearing as if by magic. As he approached, a silence fell over the hall. It wasn't the tense, fearful silence of the past, but one of quiet, expectant respect. The three of them were a symbol now, the king, the shield, and the heart. And I was the center that held them, the Omega who had redefined the very meaning of the word. Not the lowest, but the foundation, the one who connected them all. Ilarion stopped before me. He didn't offer a grand declaration. He didn't need to. He simply reached out and took my hand, his calloused thumb stroking my knuckles. The scouts returned from the southern ridge, he said, his voice a low rumble meant only for me. But in the quiet hall, every wolf heard it. The snows have melted. The pass is open. And the herds? I asked, my voice soft. They are returning. There will be plenty for everyone this season. It was a simple exchange, a report from a king to his, what was I? His queen, his mate. The words felt too small, too singular. We had no name for what we were. We were something new. From across the room, Bastion raised his cup in a silent toast. Near the hearth, Caedmon smiled, his eyes bright. They were not jealous. There was no rivalry left. Their souls were so deeply entwined with mine, with each other's, that Ilarion's touch was as much theirs as it was his. His joy was their joy. My peace was their peace. We were not four individuals bound by a strange fate. We were one soul in four bodies, a threefold alpha and the omega heart that bound them. Ilarion leaned in, his lips brushing my ear. The moon will rise soon, he whispered. Walk with me? He led me from the hall, the pack's quiet, approving gaze following us. We walked through the stone corridors of the keep and out onto the high balcony of his chambers, our chambers now. The night was clear, the air crisp and clean. A full, perfect moon hung in the sky, a lantern of liquid silver spilling its light over the sleeping valley. We stood in comfortable silence, leaning against the cold stone of the parapet, our shoulders touching. Do you ever miss it? I asked quietly. The simplicity of it? One alpha, one bond. Ilarion was silent for a long moment, watching the moonlight play on the distant peaks. I miss the illusion of simplicity, he finally answered, his voice thoughtful. I thought being king meant being singular, absolute. I was wrong. A king alone is just a tyrant waiting to fall. A sword alone is just a weapon waiting to break. A heart alone is just a weakness waiting to be exploited. He turned to face me, taking both of my hands in his. the moonlight caught in his silver eyes. The moon did not curse us, Thessaly. She healed us. She healed our pack. She saw the pride, the fear, the ambition that were pulling us apart. And she reminded us what we are meant to be: power, body, and spirit. All are worthless without the heart that unites them. He lifted my hand and pressed a kiss to the back of it, his lips lingering on my skin. The golden bond flared with a gentle, devotional warmth. Across the bond, I felt echoes of crimson and silver-green flare in response, a chorus of agreement from the other parts of our shared soul. I leaned my head against his shoulder, my gaze turning back to the moon, the source of it all. The prophecy was fulfilled. The shadow was banished. The kingdom was not just saved, it was reborn, stronger, more whole, more true than it had ever been. There would be challenges ahead. There always were. But we would face them, not as a king and his omega, not as rivals for a mate, but as a complete whole. The moon does not make mistakes. She had looked upon a broken kingdom and a lonely omega girl, and she had forged a new destiny for us all, a destiny of 4 hearts beating as one, under the silent, watchful gaze of the eternal sky.